Hello guys, this is Dark Fox Sage 2 and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto Fell in Love with Haku After She Saved Him Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Naruto looked down at the two bodies laying side by side. He had tears in his eyes as he looked at Zabuza and Haku dead form. It was snowing and Naruto looked at the man who had his arm on his shoulder. His sensei Kakashi. Naruto asked, "Can I have a few moments alone, Kakashi? Please." Kakashi nods and walks away to check on Sakura and Sasuke as well as the client Tazuna. Naruto thought, "You said you wished we could have met in a different situation, Haku. I as well do. For the first time in my life I felt someone actually knew how I felt. Then there's you, Zabuza. You acted like you did not care for Haku, but deep down you cared for her like she was your daughter. Yes, I know your secret, Haku. I can smell the difference. Why did you both have to die like this?" A voice interrupted his thoughts and said, "What if you could save them and still have them in your life, would you take it?" Naruto looked around and saw no one around him and realized it must be Kyuubi and said, "Yes." Kyuubi said, "Think your answers, boy. If you want to save them, then do as I say. Place your hands over both their hearts and hold them there until I tell you. You will feel a small tingle in your arms, but ignore it. I will explain what is going to happen and how they will live Aegean later. Go ahead and bury their bodies as they don't need them anymore and take their equipment and weapons. It will come in handy later." Naruto thought, "Why should I trust anything you say?" Kyuubi said, "Either you believe me and do as I said, or you don't and never see either Aegean. It's your choice." And the voice went away and Naruto heard footsteps coming and Naruto leaned down over them and laid a hand on both of their bodies and soon felt a small tingle in his arms. Sakura asked as she walked over, "Are they dead?" Naruto ignored her and kept his hands there. Kakashi looked at him and asked, "What happened, Naruto?" Naruto closed his eyes and said, "Somehow I became friends with them during battle. I understood them. Sadly." Kakashi smiled a sad smile knowing from experience what that was like and Sakura asked, "How can you do that? You are an idiot." And she turned and walked back over to Sasuke who was sitting against the bridge. Naruto heard Kyuubi say to quit and he looked around and saw Zabuza's sword and picked it up and walked back over to their bodies and created a few kage bunshin and said, "I am going to take care of their funeral, Kakashi. I will return later tonight or in the morning." As the clones picked up the bodies, Kakashi sighed and said, "You don't have to do that, Naruto. We can help and you don't need to be alone right now." Naruto looked at him and said, "Kakashi, Sakura would rather piss on their graves than give them a proper burial since they hurt Sasuke and I can't deal with his ego right now. Take care of them and the client. If something happens to me, Konoha will throw a party." As he walked away without saying anything else, taking the two bodies with him. Kakashi watched them leave and Sasuke walked over and said, "Where's the Dobi going?" Kakashi looked at him and saw the Sharingan and said, "Congrats on activating your bloodline. He's getting rid of their bodies. Let's get this mess cleaned up so we can hurry up and finish the mission." And Sakura just humped and turned to follow Sasuke and Kakashi. Naruto soon made it back to the meadow that he first met Haku in and had the clones started to bury them. Meanwhile, while that was happening, Haku slowly opened her eyes and looked around and saw her master Zabuza laying beside her, and she looked around and saw they were in some huge chamber and she went and checked on Zabuza. When his eyes opened, she smiled. Zabuza was confused as he sat up and asked, "Is this death?" Laughter could be heard and both looked and saw a giant cage and the figure of Kyuubi could be seen and Kyuubi said, "Yes, you are both dead, but this is not heaven or hell. You are currently in my prison." Zabuza stood up and asked, "What is this place and how did we get here? I know you're Kyuubi, but I was told you were killed by the Yondaime." Kyuubi snorted and said, That idiot just got lucky. Yes, I am Kyuubi, and you and the girl there both died on that bridge. The boy wanted you both to live, so I offered him a chance and told him how to bring you here. Haku asked. Who are you talking about and what is this place exactly? Kyuubi sighed and said, That's it. Sit down, shut up and watch the sky and you will know everything. A voice from behind them said, What the hell? Where am I? Making everyone turn and see Naruto standing there. Haku asked, Naruto, is that you? Kyuubi screamed, Silence. Everyone sit down and watch the damn movie on the sky above. When it's done I will answer all questions. If you don't I will eat you all. Leaking enough killer intent to make all three freeze. They quickly sat down and saw the ceiling change, and then they saw a white room, and then the room shifted and they saw a red-headed woman laying in a hospital bed and she looked weak and tired, and a nurse said, Congrats, it's a boy. What will you name him? A man walked into the view and said, His name's going to be Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. And he had a smile on his face, but all three people had their eyes popping out because they saw that it was the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha. Naruto asked, That's my father. Kyuubi said, Yes, and the woman with red hair is your mother Uzumaki Kushina, my sister. Making all three look at the cage and gasp as the Kyuubi changed from the demon fox to that of a man with red hair and red eyes, and his cloths were that of a standard Junin. Naruto stood up and asked, Wait a minute, if my mother is your sister then why did you attack Konoha, and who or what are you and what am I? The man sighed and said, My real name is Uzumaki Sherlock, I am the older brother and only sibling of your mother, and I am the prince of the land of Whirlpool, or that is what humans call our land. Your mother left our land on a mission and met your father and fell in love. She was supposed to return a year after she left for her long-term mission to Konoha, but instead of her return we received a letter from her saying she found someone she loves and was not returning to our land. Mother and father were heartbroken, and because I did not like it one bit and felt no man was good enough for her, I went to Konoha, but if I went in my normal human form then it would take me about half a month to have gotten there. I transformed into my kitsune form to get there quicker. When I got close to Konoha they thought I came to attack and attacked me, and when you got nearly 300 ninja fighting against me I could not change back out of my kitsune body. I had no choice but to keep attacking, and then with the genjutsu I lost most of my normal thoughts and acted on instants. Now watch the rest of the movie. Everyone was stunned, and then they watched as Kushina started to lose color, and then alarms went off and nurses came in to help her, and they watched as she died and watched as her form changed a little, and then Naruto father do a few hand signs and his mother returned to her normal look. Then they watched as a man came and told Minota that Kyuubi was coming, and then watched part of the battle in the ceiling. Then the council voting what to do about him, and then the abuse and treatment he got. They watched as everything in his life happened, and then watched as finally him meeting Haku, the battle on the bridge, and then two of their deaths, and then watched as Kyuubi told him what to do in Sakura, and then watched as Naruto buried them. When it was over they all looked at each other. Haku was in tears, Zabuza wanted blood, and Naruto was sad and then went into shock as Haku hugged him. Sherlock said, Now that you all know about Naruto life you ask nephew what you are. The truth is you are a kitsune, even though your father was human you are still kitsune. Think of it like a bloodline that does not dilute, and we are not demons as humans call us because of our power, but just about everyone in the land of Whirlpool is one. We are decent sized kingdom, about 1/2 the size of the Fire Nation, but it's so hard to get there that no one comes there and we pretty much keep to ourselves. The only other creatures in our kingdom is the dragons who are our allies. You are also the prince of the kingdom. Your grandparents are the ruling power there for at least another 100 years or so, at which time I was supposed to take over, but seeing as I am sealed in you now thanks to your father summoning the Shinigami to help seal me, I can't take over, but I can help train and advise you so you can take over in my place. I would have talked to you sooner, but the seal prevented it, and after you used my power to fight Mizuki and then on the bridge it cracked enough for me to contact you. Zabuza asked. So why did you tell your nephew to bring us here, and what is going to happen? Sherlock looked at them and said, I have a proposition for both you and the girl. The kid here has had a bad life, as you have all saw, and he has not been treated the way he should, so what I want is for you both to train him in each of your skills, including your bloodline Haku. After you train him to be equal or better than you, I want Zabuza to take over as his official bodyguard. I know you are wondering how you can do that now that you're dead. Your bodies are dead, but your souls are not. Our family has a special ability that allows us to absorb the souls of people if they have not been dead for longer than 24 hours. As such, you can have your souls put into a Kujbunshin or a blood clone body. If your clone body dies, you just wind up back here as long as Naruto lives. Kyuubi sighed and said, No, Kit. You said you wished for a way to give them a different situation. I gave you the chance. Zabuza and Haku are not dead and can live a semi-normal life instead of just going to the other side. Now they don't have to fear hunter nins and have a halfway normal life. If you chose to, you could train under them and help Zabuza fix the mist like he wanted, and Haku would still be able to serve her precious person, so everyone wins basically. Zabuza listened and asked, Okay, I understand the training and the bodyguard deal, but what is Haku supposed to do, and how will she be able to help him with her bloodline? Kyuubi smirked and said, Simple, where I want you to be his bodyguard, I would like for Haku to be a little closer to him. You both saw what it was like for him. Hell, I think that hug she gave him was probably the fourth one he's had his whole life, so what I want, if she agrees to it, is for her to become his princess. Haku blinked and looked at Naruto and asked, So let me get this straight. You want me to be his wife? Kyuubi said, Yes. Most of our family's marriages are arranged, and as Naruto's closest living relative currently, I am trying to arrange a marriage for him, since he will have to be married before he can take over as king, and I believe from what I saw through his memories that you and him would be good together, since he already has some feelings for you and I believe you do as well. You must understand that you will have to have children with him eventually, because they will be the heir to the kingdom, and you will have to have them before he takes over as king, and he needs a wife that can fight just as good as he can. Don't worry about how you have children, because I plan to have the kid here go to Whirlpool Country as soon as he's ready, and once you do, you will both get a more permanent body, but if it is killed, you would come back here Aegean and get a permanent body Aegean, but I won't tell you how we do it because it's something only the king and queen know, so until you take over to have to understand. The only difference from your normal body would be you will live a lot longer unless he is killed, and Zabuza and Haku will have an animal form like me and Naruto does. As for how he would get your bloodline, all you have to do is kiss him and accept my offer, and I would do the rest automatically while you kiss to get your bloodline. Naruto asked, Wait, what do you mean I have an animal form, and what will Tier be? Kyuubi said, Close your eyes and do the hand signs ox, monkey, dog, and kitsune, which looks like this, and then you will transform. Naruto tried it, and after he did the kitsune sign, he went up in a puff of smoke, and when it disappeared, it showed everyone that he was a three-tailed blonde kitsune with red highlights. Kyuubi said, To turn back, just focus your chakra into your chest and think release, and you will go back. As for what animal those two will be, I can't say until you go to Whirlpool, because it's our laws. I am bending them enough already to get in trouble by telling you what I have. Zabuza asked, I take it he is the only heir, correct? If so, will he have to take more than one wife? Naruto asked, Don't I get a say in this? It is my life. All three people said, No, and Naruto sighed and walked over and sat down against a wall. Kyuubi said, Yes, he is the last one. It would be up to Haku if he had any other wives, because that is considered family matters, and the females of our kingdom take care of those while the males take care of the protection. I am not saying women don't have rights, far from it actually. Zabuza looked at Haku, who was looking at Naruto, and asked, So what do you think, Haku? Haku looked at Zabuza and said, I do as you please. Zabuza frowned and said, no. This is something you must decide. I already made my decision, but it's time for you to make yours. Haku looked at Naruto and said, I do like him, but I don't know if it's love yet. I think it might be though. Zabuza looked at Naruto and said, boy, come here. Getting Naruto attention. Naruto got up and walked over, and Zabuza looked at him and grabbed him by the jacket and picked him up and said, now listen here. I am going to accept this bodyguard position, and Haku thinks she wants to be your wife, and I see her as my daughter, so you are going to treat her right. I understood. Shaking him. Haku looked at both of them wide-eyed, and Kyuubi had a glint in his eyes. Naruto nods and Zabuza said, good. Now you are going to have to change. No more acting stupid, because I saw how good you were when pulling pranks. I also don't want you to take any shit off of anyone. If you are going marry her, you are going to have to be respectable and proud. When we teach you our skill, you are going to wish you were in hell. Do you understand? Naruto could only nod, and Zabuza threw him on the ground and said, now kiss your fiancé so we can get started. Making both teens blush. Haku said, but I said I don't know if it's love. Zabuza looked at her and asked, do you accept me as your father? And Haku nods yes, and Zabuza said, then I arrange for you and him to be married. I saw how you blushed when you found him in the woods, and I know how you are, so don't try any of that shit on me, young lady. And laughs while both get red-faced even more. Haku waited for Naruto to stand up, and he closed his eyes and tried to make faces as to how to kiss while still a few feet away from Haku. Haku giggled by this but decided to cut him some slack and walked over and kissed him. She felt lightheaded, and Naruto felt an explosion in his head. After a few seconds, Haku pulled back and Kyuubi said, good, now you will be able to hear us when you leave here, and if you want to pull one of us, make a cage bunshin while thinking of which one of us you want, and I will do the rest, but don't try and pull me out because it will kill you, and don't do it around others unless you get inventive and get a cover story. Naruto, who was still in a daze, just nods, and Kyuubi smirked to himself. Zabuza asked, so you know tree climbing, right? I want you to go and try the same thing but on water. Same rules but harder, and use your cage bunshin, because what they learn you learn, or at least that's what I heard the last time I met someone who knew that jutsu. I think his name was Itachi or something like that. Naruto blinked and saw he was sitting on the ground next to where he buried the two, and he looked at the sky and got up after seeing he still had a few hours before sunrise, and he walked toward a river, and when he got there he created 30 cage bunshins and started to try and walk on water but fell in. He got up and tried it again and again and again. Several hours later, Kakashi had tracked Naruto down and saw him standing on top of water, and was shocked when he saw him going through hand seals, and suddenly 4 Mizu bunshins appeared, and a few seconds later they fell back into the water and Naruto fell to his knees panting. Kakashi was shocked as he saw Naruto not only standing on water but also doing a mist jutsu, as well as having Zabuza's sword on his back and an extra holster on his leg that looked full of stuff. Deciding by the look of Naruto to stop him before he hurts himself, he walks into the clearing and said, yo. Getting Naruto attention. Naruto looked at him while sweating and smiled before getting up and walking to the shore, and then passed out as soon as he got on land. Kakashi sweat drops and chuckles and thought, finally out of chakra, huh? I will ask him tomorrow. And picked Naruto up and carried him back to the house. He had already found the graves while following Naruto's scent. When he got back to the house, Sasuke looked up and asked, what happened to the Dobi? Kakashi said, he just ran out of chakra after burying those bodies as well as the fighting today. Sakura saw the sword and asked, what's that idiot doing with that sword? He can't even pick it up properly, more or less know how to use it. Sasuke-kun should have it. And walked over and grabbed the handle only to jump back as it shocked the hell out of her. Sakura looked at her hand and saw that it had a light burn on it and she asked, "What happened?" Kakashi thought for a moment and said, "Well, I know that some swords have special defenses to them that won't let anyone else but the owner touch it, and since Naruto was the first to touch it after Zabuza died, I figured the defense reset for him. I know Hiati has one that's the same way. Don't either of you try and take it or you might get hurt more." As he led Naruto up the stairs to his room. When he got there, he decided to see what else Naruto got and checked his weapon holster and found Senbons, a few explosive tags, kunai and shurikens, the hunter nin's mask that was broke in half, and a book on pressure points for basic medicine. He took the book and walked downstairs with it and said, "So do either of you want this book?" Basic medicine. Sasuke snorted and looked away emotionally, and Sakura said, "Why would I need that when I got Sasuke-kun to protect me?" Kakashi sighed and a voice from behind him said, "I will keep it, Kakashi." Shocking him as he had not felt a presence behind him. He turned and saw Naruto standing there with a look that was pissed, and Kakashi just shrugged and handed it to Naruto, who walked back in the room and closed the door, and if anyone would have noticed they would have saw Naruto was still passed out, and Naruto changed his appearance as he knelt down, and it was Haku, and she slipped the book back into Naruto holsters and her body melted into a pile of water. Naruto was inside his mind sparring with Zabuza when Haku reappeared and Kyuubi asked, "So did it work?" Haku said, "Yes. I was able to get the book back and nobody realized I was not him or a water clone. I still can't believe that his sensei would give his stuff away to those other two," with a little anger in her voice. Naruto was punched in the face and slid beside Haku when he heard that and asked, "He did what?" in a shocked voice. Haku looked down at him and giggled at the look on his face and said, "He went through your stuff and took my book on pressure points and medicine that I had. The pink-haired already tried to take your sword and give it to the Uchiha, but it shocked her." As she helped him up. Zabuza heard this and walked over to Naruto and said, "You need to start standing up for yourself, kid. I know you have been through hell, but you could take both their asses out easy from what I saw. It's not easy besting ABNU as well as Chunin and Junin like you did. Ready to go, Aegean. Somehow I am not tired." Kyuubi smirked and said, "And you won't. The kid here won't get tired, but his body will feel it tomorrow even though we are in his mind, because his muscles will think they actually have been fighting. He won't get physically strong or fast by training in here, but at least he is able to learn jutsu as well as hand-to-hand and sword skills, though he will need to imagine swords, but that will be later. Get back to work because you need to get strong fast." Zabuza punched Naruto in the stomach, knocking him back. As those two got fighting, Aegean Haku turned to Kyuubi and asked, "What will I have to learn to be the princess of your kingdom?" Kyuubi looked at her and said, "You already know what you need to learn. It was the lesson you taught him. If you consider my people your precious people, everything will be fine. Once you get your new body, you will have to practice with it, but it should not be hard because it will act like your old body unless you go into your transformed state. If you want, go ahead and work on your bloodline. The pipes above us have chakra in them, but in this world it will act as water. Try and discover new ways to use your bloodline or make it better. After all, you are going to want to spend a lot of time with your fiancé, don't you?" Saying the last part with a smirk, making Haku blush. Haku started to work on her bloodline and discovered he was telling the truth, as she was able to do the demonic ice mirrors as well as the 1000 needles of death easily. She then got to work on a project she was working on but never had the chance to finish. Kyuubi for his part sat back and watched, but in his mind he was working on Naruto body, giving him more of his chakra as well as enhancing a few other things. He thought, "Someday, nephew, I will be no more, but you will live on, but I will stay here long enough for you to meet our family and hopefully start your own. Hopefully me using this technique to save these two will make a small refund in your heart for me. I am sorry." The next day when Naruto woke up, he was sore as hell, but he had completely recovered his chakra supply. He got up and got ready for the day but found his cloths were a little tighter on him and made his way to breakfast and saw everyone looking at him and Naruto said, "Morning," as he sat down. Kakashi looked up from his book and asked, "So how do you feel?" Naruto moved his shoulders and said, "Like it's my birthday," making everyone but Kakashi smile as Kakashi knew what that meant. Kakashi asked, "So where did you learn Miss Jutsu?" making everyone look at him and then Naruto. Naruto sighed and said, "I memorized some of the hand seals you and Zabuza along with Haku used during your battles. I experimented with a few and got lucky with Mizubunshin." Kakashi shrugged thinking it could be true and Kakashi asked, "Can you do any other missed jutsu besides Mizubunshin?" Naruto said, "I saw some others but have not tried them yet since I only saw most of the hand signs. I also tried water walking but have not made any real progress with it. I can stay on it for a little while but it's tough." Kakashi eyed him for a moment and said, "I see. What about the book and Senbons?" Naruto shrugged and said, "After Sasuke was knocked out by Haku I thought that it might be useful to learn to use them to incapacitate enemies like Haku did and the book would help me do that as well." Sakura screeched and said, "How dare you say sass," and to the shock of everyone at the table Naruto hit the pressure point on her neck with his fingers knocking her out. Sasuke had an amused look on his face. Kakashi, who was shocked by it, was smiling behind his mask and asked, "Where did you learn that?" Naruto shrugged and said, "It's the same spot Sasuke and Zabuza were hit by Haku and I saw it in the book here when I glanced at it. I thought if I can get enough practice I might be able to take someone out like Haku did," and her voice is making my headache worse. But he thought, "And Haku hit that spot on me for 9 hours last night in my sleep. Time works different there." Kakashi nods and said, "Well, don't use your teammates as a test dummy. You could have killed her if you missed the spot." Sasuke grunted and said, "Show me that jutsu," with his Sharingan active. Naruto shrugged and did two hand size. In one hand he made a fist while on the other hand he stuck out his middle finger and shoved it into his fist making everyone but Inari red-faced. In Naruto head he heard 3 people laughing their asses off. Kakashi shrugged while holding in his laughter and said, "Well, today you can take Tazuna to the bridge while I work with Sasuke on his Sharingan. You got to practice yesterday. Sakura will stay here since you knocked her out and watch Tsunami." Naruto asked, "Can you show me a jutsu or write one down for me to practice today?" Kakashi looked up from his book and said, "Sorry, I don't want to overpower the team so I can't teach you any more jutsu until the others catch up." Naruto said, "But you have not taught me anything besides tree climbing." Kakashi shrugged and said, "So, that's all I taught the others." And he grabbed Sasuke and left in a swirl of leaves. Naruto narrowed his eyes and thought, "Lying piece of shit. I have seen you teaching Sasuke privately." After he was gone Naruto looked at Tazuna and said, "You ready, old man?" Tazuna smiled and nodded and got his things and they both left. Inari looked at Sakura who was passed out on the table and got an evil glint in his eyes and ran to his room and came back a few moments later with some ink and Tsunami asked, "What are you doing, Inari?" Inari smiled and said, "I just thought I would give her a present for everything she's done for us." Tsunami sighed but could not tell her son no after he finally acted happy Aegean and left the room as to not see what was going to happen. She later wished she would have. Inari pushed her back in the chair and took the ink and used it to cover her lips as well as her eyebrows and drew a picture of the bridge on her forehead with the words "Thank you" under it. When Naruto and Tazuna got to the bridge most of the village had came out to help and Naruto looked over the side of the bridge and got an idea and said, "Hey old man. Give me about 3 minutes and I will be back." "Okay." And he saw Tazuna nod. Naruto jumped over the side and walked down one of the support beams and then used his Maskage Bunshin no Jutsu to create around 400 clones. He then thought of Zabuza and made on of him and a moment later one of Haku. Naruto then said, "Okay, work with these guys while I keep an eye on the old drunk. Is that alright?" Haku and Zabuza both looked at each other and felt their bodies and shook their heads, and Naruto ran up the side of the bridge and started to help carry stuff around to speed things up and also train. Zabuza pointed his finger and said, "Okay, the left half works with me and the right with Haku." And they all screamed, "Yes." Zabuza then had them while standing on water work on the Mizubunshin and the hidden mist jutsu. Haku took her half and said, "Okay, I want you each to try and make ice by using your new bloodline. Start with a fluid motion and use the water around you and it should be easy. If you are almost out of chakra dispel so Naruto-kun gets all the info." And they all started to work. About 5 hours later Sakura and Tsunami came with lunch and everyone had a good laugh at Sakura's expense because the ink Inari used was permanent and her forehead and lips were beet red and blue from trying to get it off. Naruto asked, "Where's Inari?" Sakura said, "He's hanging around somewhere," with a creepy smile on her face. Inari was currently hanging from the ceiling in his room with ninja wire holding him in place and a lump on his head. Naruto shrugged and took a sandwich and ate it, and Sakura said, "I wish that fog would leave. It makes me uneasy," as she looked at the fog just barely under the bridge. Naruto shrugged as he finished eating, knowing it was the hidden mist jutsu, and pulled his sword off his back and tried to hold it in the style Zabuza had showed him in his head, though it was harder, but because of his minor growth spurt it was easier to walk with and hold. Sakura just rolled her eyes and said, "Idiot, quit trying to act cool," and went to hit him, but Naruto put the sword up and blocked her punch with the side of it. Sakura became pissed and started an all-out attack on Naruto, who blocked each and every one of her hits with almost no trouble. Sakura soon started to run out of energy, but her anger would not let her calm down, so she ran at Naruto with everything she had in one punch, and Naruto smirked and replaced himself with a Mizubunshin, and when Sakura hit it her hand went right through his head, and at first she was white as a ghost thinking she actually killed him until she felt someone hit her in the neck Aegean, knocking her out. Naruto, who was standing behind her fallen form, thought, "I am sure glad Haku-chan taught me that one first." For the next few days Naruto discovered that he was basically being thrown to the side by Kakashi. Naruto had gotten to the point he used a Kajibushin to henge into a fox and run through the forest, and discovered Kakashi was teaching Sasuke several techniques as well as weight training with his personal weights. Naruto felt cheated, but he soon found a way around that. Apparently his uncle knew something about sealing and had him take a shuriken and tie it to each of his arms and legs after applying a seal to it to increase the weight based on how much chakra you put in it. Zabuza also made him put it on the sword also. Sakura was getting more restless because luckily Kakashi had her do guard duty every other day, but when Naruto asked, "Why does Sasuke get out of doing his share of the work?" all three of his teammates looked at him like he was crazy. Zabuza and Haku both created a hit list off of what they had been watching, and both have increased Naruto training. Naruto had gotten to the point he can use Zabuza's sword pretty well now, but it was not mastered yet, but it was gaining fast and his muscles were getting stronger from the weight training and his sword play having improved also with the help of 600 Kajibunshins. Naruto chakra control had gone up through the roof because Zabuza had Naruto clones water walking for 2 hours a day while working off the basic of the leaf balancing that they saw in his memories from Iruka and modified them. Now they were up to small rocks. Naruto use of Haku bloodline had increased as well. He could use the 1000 needles of death as well as making Senbons out of ice, but the demonic ice mirrors were still out of his league currently. Naruto had followed Zabuza instructions and found Gato hideout and quickly went through and found some money as well as cloths, and with both Zabuza and his uncle's help he learned the basic of storage sealing. However, it was not all fun and games. Flashback. Naruto had followed Zabuza instruction and found Gato base, and he was approaching it when he heard voices, so he quietly went and started sneaking around to see what was going on. He soon discovered about 30 of the mercs they had ran off had returned to the hideout and one new person was Thier. Naruto looked at the new person and saw he had an Iwa headband on with a slash in it. Deciding to listen in, he set agents to wall and heard one man say, "I say we go back and kill them all and have our fun with the woman," and several men cheered at this. The one with the Iwa headband said, "I agree we should go back, but first I think we should make an example not to mess with us. I have observed the last few days that the Konoha nin Sharingan Kakashi is privately training the last Uchiha of Konoha to use his bloodline as well as personal training, and he has the other two switch back and forward on guarding the bridge builder and his family. Today is the blonde boy's day off and according to you all he was one of the main powerhouses, so we should watch out for him, but the girl is useless. I say tomorrow why the blonde is with the bridge builder we pay a little house visit and take the girl and that woman and do as we please and kill the little boy. After that we will set a trap for when the old man returns he dies in an explosion. Without Thier client the Konoha nin will leave, especially after they find the body of Thier female teammate, and then we can do as we please to the village. Who agrees with me, or would you all rather take the chance to run into Kakashi and the blonde Aegean?" Naruto heard this and thought, "We can't let them do that to Tazuna and his family." Zabuza said, "I agree." Haku said, "I also agree, Naruto-kun. Let us out and we will help take them out." Naruto nods and created 50 Kajbunshin and had them rush into the room where the men were and start fighting while he made one for Haku and one for Zabuza. Naruto would have handed Zabuza his sword, but Zabuza had already learned that if anyone including him touches it besides Naruto he got shocked and would return to the seal, so he took a pair of kuniya from Naruto and Haku took some Senbon needles and they went in to join the fighting. The Iwa nin saw the blonde come in, had snuck around, and when he saw Zabuza and Haku go into the room where the mercs were leaving the blonde alone he thought that was the real one, but then his eyes got wide and said, "So the Yondaime had a son. I can tell you're his son by one look. I bet I can get a great reward for killing you." And he charged at Naruto. Naruto, who had turned and saw the nin coming at him, and asked, "How did you get behind me and find me?" The Iwa nin was throwing punches and kicks at Naruto, who was jumping out of the way, and said, "I sensed you the moment you approached and said what I said to draw you into a fight. Your stealth sucks." And he pulled out a kuniya and tried to stab Naruto, but Naruto had blocked it with his sword, which he pulled off his back after getting enough of an opening to do so. The nin was stronger than Naruto and was easily matching Naruto in power when Haku came back to check on Naruto after all his clones had been destroyed and her and Zabuza had either killed or incapacitated all the merc, and she saw Naruto fighting a ninja who looked to be a Chunin level at least, and she threw her last Senbon needle into his back at a point that would paralyze him for life. When the nin felt the needle in him he lost all the strength he had on his kuniya, and Naruto was pushing with everything he had the moment the nin's legs started to give out, and with the force of the pushing and the nin falling, Naruto decapitated him along the length of the blade. As his head fell away from his body Naruto turned white as a ghost and Haku gasped, and Zabuza walked in the room and could tell what happened and asked, "First kill?" And Naruto was shaking and Zabuza said, "Kid, I won't lie to you. It's never easy, but think of it this way. If you had not killed him, then he would have killed you and then killed your teammates and then old man and his family and who knows who else. You heard what his plan was. You don't come up with a plan like that if you don't intend to follow it. You did not kill him. You saved everyone he would have killed." Haku had hugged Naruto in the middle of the speech and Naruto was crying, but after he heard Zabuza he asked, "Do you hate me now? Am I a monster?" Haku slapped him and said, "You are not a monster. You showed true strength by protecting your precious people. I would do the same thing. It's my fault he died also because I hit him in the back to save you." And then she realized that was her actual first kill also because it was her fault, but she said, "I did it to save you who are my precious person. Come on and let's check this place out and find you some new cloths since those are covered in blood." End flashback. After searching every room for valuables, weapons and stuff like that, Naruto had used his clone army to bring everything of value to the village and dressed in his new cloths he said, I found Gato base and brought all of this stuff to you so that way it will help you recover. And the people cheered and nobody noticed Naruto had about 6 scrolls of things for himself though nobody cared either. When Naruto walked into the house that night everyone looked at him strangely. Would you if a guy who thrives in orange walked in with a pair of black pants and a gray long-sleeve shirt with a sleeveless vest on over it and his lower half of his face covered just like Zabuza had his and a huge sword on his back? Kakashi had actually dropped his book and if it were not for his blue eyes and blonde hair they would have thought he was a mini Zabuza. He also did not have on ninja sandals but rather combat boot. Sasuke asked, where did you get the cloths from Naruto? Naruto smirked under his mask and said, I went and did the people of Wave a favor and found Gato base and got everything I thought valuable from it. And he saw his teammates get a greedy look and then Naruto said, and I gave it all to the people of Wave in the middle of the village. I just found some cloths that I thought would fit me as payment. And saw all of them get a look of despair while Tazuna and his family were happy. Naruto started up the stairs when Sakura saw the scrolls and asked, what about the scrolls? Making everyone look at him. Naruto shrugged and said, I got about 20 changes of cloths and since I found a book that told the basic of storage sealing I read how to seal the cloths in it so I would not have to take such a big pack. I need to learn something since nobody wants to teach anything. Sakura screamed, what are you talking about? Kakashi taught us tree climbing. Naruto sighed and said, Sakura, what good would chakra control do you besides make you a little faster and stronger longer if you can't do nothing but punch stuff because your teacher is too busy playing favorites? As he walked up to his room and slammed the door. Sakura looked shocked and turned to see Sasuke who was acting as if nothing was wrong and Kakashi was reading his book and Sakura asked, you're not playing favorites, are you Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi just looked up from his book and asked, did you say something? Sakura could not believe her sensei acting like that. Sasuke smirked and said, what does it matter? I am an Uchiha and he's nothing. His smirk brought hearts to Sakura's eyes and she forgot what she was mad about. Kakashi was thinking about what Naruto said and thought, could he be right? Am I really leaving him and Sakura alone and focusing on Sasuke? I do owe it to Obito to make sure his family goes on because if Itachi comes back he would kill Sasuke so Naruto will just have to get over it. I feel bad for it but I can make up for it after I am done with Sasuke. Naruto sighed as he went to sleep that night and surprisingly he did not go to where the only true people who cared for him was. Instead he found himself in a white hallway. Naruto looked around and saw a door at the end of the hallway and walked toward it and when he opened the door he was blinded by even more light and then his eyes adjusted and he saw what looked to be some sort of security room or something and he walked inside and looked around and saw a monitor that showed inside the seal and then another monitor that showed what was going on outside of his body. He looked around and a voice behind him said, welcome, making him turn and faint after seeing who was behind him. A few minutes later he awoke and saw himself standing there but this person was different. This person had kitsune ears and tails and was a little taller than he was. Naruto asked, who are you? The figure smiled and said, I am your inner self. I am the one who convinced you to act like an idiot and I am also the one who has been keeping our dim-witted uncle from blowing the hell out of our body by sending so much chakra into us. I brought you here to tell you I am going to insert into your memory a few jutsu I watched in our memories and that will give you a chance to get more learned. You will know how to do them and what they do but you need to learn them and I also want you to talk to Haku-chan about us learning one-hand seals. If that damn Cyclops does not get his head out of his ass soon we might have to fight him or his little star pupil. One-hand signs are different for each person but the seals are the same but the chakra usage is different and it makes the Sharingan useless. I don't know if we will meet Aegean, but go have some fun and make sure you spend some time with Haku outside of the seal and give Zabuza some time out as well. And then the room went black. Naruto opened his eyes and saw Haku sitting beside him, worried as was Zabuza and Kyuubi from his cage. Naruto slowly stood up and said, "That was weird." Haku asked, "What happened? You fell asleep nearly 2 hours ago and you just now got here?" Worriedly. Naruto got up and said, "I met myself, as strange as that sounds, and he said I was going to get some new jutsu he's been working on in my head, and he wants you to teach me one-hand signs so that way if I fight a Sharingan I have an advantage." Kyuubi smirked and said, "That's not bad of an idea. If you learn them I can also teach you some of our family jutsu as well, since your control is nearly good enough." Everyone agreed with that and they started to work on it, and using the basic henge, Kujibunshin, Mizubunshin, replacement, sexy no jutsu which made Zabuza blush and Haku punch him, hidden mist jutsu, and surprisingly he was able to make a sheet of ice and adjust it to do what he wanted with a little control and imagination. The next day when Naruto got up, Zabuza had a mission for him, as did Haku, and Naruto decided to see if Kakashi would help him. He went downstairs early and saw Kakashi reading his book while everyone was asleep. Naruto decided to get straight to the point and said, "Kakashi, I know you don't want to teach me anything, but I was wondering if you can help me with one thing I am working on. I know you can summon dogs like you did against Zabuza, and I want to work on my stealth, so I was wondering if you could summon one dog that can talk and understand human and let me work with him today while you work with Sasuke." Kakashi glanced at him and put his book in his pocket and thought it over, and Naruto saw the look that he had and knew what the answer was and said, "Forget it. I already know your answer," and walked out of the house. Kakashi thought, "Well, I was thinking about it, but I don't want to use Pukun that way since he's the only one I know that would do it," and shrugged his shoulder to reach for his book, but it was gone, and he started to look for it but could not find it, and he was about to go after Naruto when Sasuke came and asked, "So what are you going to teach me today?" Kakashi glanced up and said, "Stealth. I want you to find and follow Naruto and see if he has my book. If he does, I want you to take it back and bring it to me, but don't get discovered doing it." Sasuke nodded and left, and Kakashi thought, "Well, this way I can help him get stronger and also keep an eye on Naruto. He's been weird lately." Naruto had went into the woods and had started doing his kata for training with his sword when he felt someone in the woods, and Naruto sighed and said, "What do you want, Em?" making Sasuke flinch. Sasuke said, "Fight me," and jumped down and got into a fighting stance. Naruto looked at him and did one-hand seals behind his back and leaned against his sword that was still a foot taller than him and said, "No," and Sasuke felt his arms go limp on his side as a pair of needles embedded themselves in each arm, immobilizing them. Naruto turned and said, "Have Kakashi take them out or you may lose the ability to use your arms permanently," and then he melted into a pile of water, as did the two clones that were on the side of Sasuke. Sasuke was pissed and tried to move his arms but was unable to, and he could not pull the needles out with his teeth because they were too far away. He had no choice but to go to Kakashi. Naruto for his part was happy on the inside because it turned out that his inner self was right, because Sasuke did not notice when he made 3 Mizubunshin or when he replaced himself doing one-hand seals. He decided today he would treat himself, so he went deep into the woods and summoned Haku out and sat down and said, "So let's talk and get to know each other better, Haku-chan." Haku giggled and said, "You're still hopeless, Naruto-kun," as she pressed her lips to his, shocking him, and when she pulled back he was confused as hell. Naruto asked, "Why do you say that?" Haku smiled and said, "I know almost everything about you and have already told you my life. You want to know why I agreed to marry you. It was because you're kind, caring, understanding, cute, and I feel like you complete me. Let's just sit here and hold each other." As she sat down between his legs and leaned back against him, and he smelled her hair and asked, "How is it you scent as that of your real body?" I thought for sure it would have been mine. Haku looked up and said, "Who knows, my little kitsune? Who knows? You know, I think idiocy runs in your family. Your uncle is the same way sometimes. You should hear him sometimes in there. By the way, I know I am going to be happy on our wedding night." With a blush on her cheek and reached into Naruto pocket and pulled out Kakashi book, and Naruto got wide-eyed after he realized what she meant and muttered, "Aroheim," making Haku blush even more as she started to read. Naruto asked, "How come you wanted me to make Kakashi book disappear so you could read it?" Haku said, "Well, you know how I told you I was a boy. I do that to everyone, and I learned if I have a copy of this book with me and read it, everyone thinks I am a guy, and over time I actually started reading them, but I have only read volumes 2 and 5. This is the latest volume, number 16. Read it with me." And she leaned back Aegean and held it where Naruto could read over her shoulder. Every time he started to pass out, she would stab him with a senbon, making him forget about passing out, and soon got out of having nosebleeds as well. When Sasuke got to the house, he had to kick the door until someone opened it, and it was Inari that opened the door and asked, "What happened to you?" making everyone look at him and Sakura scream out his name. Kakashi sighed and said, "Looks like your stealth failed." As he got up and walked over and looked at Sasuke's arms and raised an eyebrow and thought, "He's getting pretty good at pressure points." Kakashi then took them out carefully and said, "Explain." Sasuke tried to move his arms and Kakashi said, "They won't work for about a day, so get talking." Sasuke just said, "The idiot got lucky." Kakashi chuckled and said, "No, he's getting good. Too good actually." As he realized how good he's getting. Then, to the shock of everyone, he left in a swirl of leaves. Naruto was relaxing when he felt Haku stiffen and did a few hand signs, and a sheet of ice appeared and Haku dropped the book on it and it disappeared and the ice melted. Then Naruto felt it. Kakashi was coming and he looked at Haku, who had hanged into Naruto, and pulled out a senbon needle and said, "Trust me. I bet he wants to know how you're getting so good at pressure points." And she jabbed the senbon in his leg in one of his points and pulled out another needle. Kakashi arrived a few moments after that and said, "Yo." As he looked at Naruto laying on the ground with his back to a tree and a senbon in his leg, while another Naruto sat there with another senbon, and it drove it into Naruto's leg and asked, "Can you move your leg now?" Naruto said, "No. They're both numb now." And the clone Haku pulled them out and said, "Let me know when the fox heals it so we can try Aegean." Kakashi walked over and kicked the clone, dispelling it, and missed the pissed look on the real Naruto face as he said, "So that's how you're getting better at pressure points? Using your body as a test subject, since the fox's chakra heals you fast?" Naruto snorts and said, "Yeah, it's all I could come up with since I can't get any help with my training," sarcastically. Kakashi sighed and said, "What's with you all of a sudden and training?" Naruto looked at him and said, "I am tired of everyone calling me an idiot because of the fox. I am tired of everyone treating me like a plague. I am tired of being beat to hell. I am tired of doing everything I can and never get any thanks. I saved your life when we first met Zabuza, and you gave the credit to Sasuke, who was ready to abandon you and run scared. It's bad enough you let Sakura attack me without saying anything to her, and you playing favorites with Chichen ass, but you won't even lift a finger to try and train me." And then, to the shock of Kakashi, Naruto got up and started to walk away, ignoring the fact he should not be moving for a day. Kakashi went to reach for him to stop him when Sasuke came walking up and said, "Teach me," causing Kakashi to look at him and away from Naruto. Kakashi sighed and said, "What?" And suddenly Sasuke went up in a puff of smoke, making Kakashi realized he was just tricked by a genin. Kakashi turned to follow Naruto but lost his trail after it left the clearing. He looked around and thought, "What the hell? I did not see him make a cage bunshin and his trail ends here, so he has figured a way to trick my senses." About a mile away from Kakashi, Naruto was on the ground panting and thought, "Damn it. I still can't do that right yet. As the ice mirror melted away behind him. After a few moments he resummoned Haku, who made another small piece of ice and the book fell out of it, and she said, I had it hidden in a tree using my ice shushin to take it there and bring it here. And then they both sat down and started reading Aegean. The next day the bridge had been finished and Team 7 started to leave after saying their goodbyes, and Naruto was busy in his thoughts that he failed to realize as he was walking. Everyone was watching him do one hand signs with a glossed over look on his face even though he was keeping up with the others, and when Sakura went to hit him he acted on instinct and stepped away from her hit, never even stopping doing hand signs. Sakura after 2 hours of this said, That's it, what are you doing, Naruto? It's getting on my nerves. And she had stopped crossing her arms defiantly, but what happened next shocked everyone as two Naruto appeared and one grabbed Sakura from behind while the other grabbed her feet and continued walking even though she was fighting to get free and Naruto still had the glossed over look. Kakashi raised his covered eye and looked at them and thought, how did he learn to do one-hand signs for cage bunshins? Naruto stopped and said, well, are we going? I need to talk to the Hokage about something, and started walking even faster. Kakashi said, no, I think we should stop and rest a little while. Naruto looked at him and said, fine, as he walked over and started to do slashes into a tree, getting his body more used to using such a big sword. Kakashi said, Naruto, stop training and rest. Naruto snorts and said, why? So next time you're not around someone can kill me. As he continued to work on it. Kakashi had a bad feeling and asked, what happened? Naruto looked at him and said, first. And went back to working on the tree, ignoring the looks his two teammates were sending him, trying to figure out what he was talking about. Kakashi realized exactly what he meant and wondered what happened and asked, how did it happen? Naruto sighed and said, since I went to find you to see if you would help me with a jutsu and I found you sucking up the Uchiha over there, giving him your personal weights as well as teaching him jutsu. I decided to do something productive, so I decided I would try and find Gato Base and see if I could find anything there to help with my training as well as give the people of Wave back their stuff. But when I got there, some of the guys we ran off of the bridge were there and they were planning on attacking the village as well as killing Tazuna family while I was at the bridge with Tazuna and Sakura there with Inari and Tsunami. Apparently I was not the only one who noticed you pampering the Tem every day. One of the guys turned out to be a former Iwa nin, and guess what? With just one look at me I found out who my dad was, since I am the spitting image of him minus the whiskers. I see you already knew, huh? Chalk up another thing I am pissed at you about. Anyways, with my cover blown since my stealth was not good enough I had to fight. Luckily between my mask Bunshin no Jutsu and my sword practice I was able to beat them all to a pulp, but I wound up killing the Iwa nin. Oh, and by the way, in case you have not realized it yet, Sharingan Kakashi. This is a Bunshin body and I am actually at the gates of Konoha right now. CYA. And he went up in smoke followed by the other two. Kakashi was wide-eyed and said, we move now. And got up and took off through the trees, and Sakura and Sasuke both looked at each other before jumping into the trees after him. At Konoha, Naruto walked through town, and after he got the info from the Kajbunshin that Kakashi knew who his dad was by the look on his face, he decided to have a little revenge, as he had 3 Cage Bunshins out and he had the one of Kakashi pull a Hinata imitation in the middle of the road, and Sasuke walked over and pulled his mask off and started to kiss, though Naruto was not looking, and then the Sakura clone started to scream, that's right. Sasuke Uchiha is off the market now as he has fallen in love with his sensei Kakashi. They plan to get married after he makes Chunin. Getting the attention of everyone around, and a crowd was starting to form, and Kakashi and Sasuke, after getting at least 75 people to see their makeout session, jumped up on the roof and once out of view went up in smoke. Sakura and Naruto quickly made it away from the gawking crowd, and when they got close to the tower, Naruto recreated Kakashi and Sasuke and continued on their way. After they walking into the Hokage office, the Hokage looked up from his paperwork and said, "So Team 7, how was your mission?" Sasuke closed the door and locked it, getting a raised eyebrow from the Hokage before they all went up in smoke, and the henge Naruto had on, covering his new cloths and sword as well, and Naruto said, "We need to talk, old man. I have a lot of questions and you have a lot of explaining, and I came back ahead of my team to get those answers," in a stern voice that was on the edge of pissed. The third asked, "Naruto, is that you?" Naruto snorts and said, "Yeah, it's me. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. By the way, that C rank was actually an A rank, but we completed it, but I made my first kill on the mission, but the Sharingan dickhead was too busy fucking the Uchiha to pay attention to know that before I had my clones tell him when I was walking through the gates. They should be here this afternoon or tonight sometime. So let's chat." The third side, knowing this was going to be a long chat, and he said, "Your father asked me to hide your parents from you until you were 16 or a chunin. Your father was the last of his clan and your mother has no family." Naruto said, "Wrong. I have an uncle and grandparents in Whirlpool Country. Well, my uncle's not, because I ran into him on the mission as he was tracking the Iwa Nin that I killed, and he showed me a picture of my mother and him along with my grandparents after he saw the spiral design on my cloths and asked me about it. Because of some shit that happened, I had to see all my memories, including my birth and mom's passing and my naming and the council meetings and all the hell. Anyways, my grandparents are the king and queen of Whirlpool, so let's continue." As he crosses his arms. The third looked at him and asked, "How do you know that he was telling the truth?" Naruto sighed and said, "You would not believe me." As he walked over to the window and looked out at his dad's face. The third said, "Try me." Naruto looked back at him and said, "I met the fox after the bridge battle in my head. He made me watch all my life and tried to make me break, and that's how I know the picture of my mother and the one in my memories were the same woman." The third nods and asked, "What happened after that with the fox, I mean?" Naruto sighed and said, "I told him I don't care what he said, and I told him that if I die he dies, so he is either going to pay me rent with his chakra when I need it, or I would kill myself by jumping off the Hokage mountain, or tie some boulders to my feet and jump into the ocean or something to make sure we both die. Anyways, he told me I had balls for threatening him, and he agreed and shoved me out of the seal." The third nods and said, "I knew your father and mother were hiding something. I never knew what, but I had thought it was you, but I guess I was wrong. Your dad must have known about her being a princess. So what do you want?" Naruto said, "Look, old man. With the way my team's been lately, as well as having to relive my entire life and finding out facing Kyuubi and the problem of my first kill, I want to be alone for a while. I want to go to Whirlpool Country to meet my grandparents and my uncle. Apparently I am a prince, and when he gets back to Whirlpool he is going to inform my grandparents that mom had a child." The third thought for a moment and said, "When your team gets back I will send you and them." Naruto slammed his hand on the desk and said, "No. Not my team. I have had enough of them, and I will do more than knock them out with pressure points if I have to stay with them much longer. I can make the trip myself, since I was told how to get there and also told where a messenger was for the people of Whirlpool, so I can have them come and get me, and it's only about 2 days travel from here." The third thought and said, "I can't send a genin." Naruto said, "Then I will become a missing nin, old man. I am to the snapping point. Learning that not only was it my father who sealed Kyuubi in me, but also that my sensei knew who I was and still treated me like shit, I don't want to mess with it now. I just need a couple of months to get this out of my head and to finally meet my family, so please, old man." The third sighed and said, "Fine, but on certain conditions. 1. You must send me a message every 2 weeks. 2. You must get some proof from the king that you are indeed his son and send it with one of the messages. 3. You must not do anything that would be considered treason to Konoha. 4. You must be back in 3 months by April 22nd because that is the day the Chunin exams start and I suspect your team will be entering and you must enter with them. Naruto nods and said, that's fine, but can I ask for a few requests? As I am right now, I am not ready for the Chunin exams. I need a few jutsu because all Kakashi would teach was tree climbing. I taught myself water walking while balancing a rock with chakra, Mizubunshin, hidden mist jutsu, and ice needles. I have been working on kenjutsu with Zabuza's sword here, but I still have a long way to go even with Kujubunshin helping, which reminds me. Why don't you use them to help with paperwork? Anyways, I got some money though. I gave about 99% of it to the people of Wave from Gato hideout as well as some cloths since my old ones were covered in blood and a whole bunch of weapons from the merc. I would like to sell the weapons but I don't know who to sell them to who won't cheat me, and I would also like to get some training gear as well. That reminds me, here is the head of the missing Iwa nin I killed. As he handed a scroll to the Hokage. The Hokage was stunned and asked, how do you know how to seal? As he set the scroll on the desk. Naruto pulled out 2 books and said, this one taught me some medicine and pressure points and this one taught me sealing. And the third looked at them and nodded, having read both books himself. The third nods and bit his thumb, and Naruto walked to the window as he heard the popping noise telling him the third unsealed the head. After a few moments he heard it being resealed and Naruto turned back and the third said, do you know who he was? Naruto shook his head and the third said, his name was Audley, White OC. He is a B rank missing nin from Iwa. Wanted for murder of over 200 men and women before the cage of Iwa decided he needed to be killed, but he escaped before they could. He is worth $1.5 million in the bingo book. He was a master of stealth and torture. You did a good job, Naruto. Do you need to talk to anyone about it? Naruto said, I already did. My uncle. I am just lucky him and his team showed up when they did, or the merc would have killed me when I was discovered. He decided that with the guy dead he would return so he could notify the rest of my family about me. I wanted to talk to Kakashi, but when he not only forced me and Sakura to do Sasuke's share of the work of guard duty after Gato death and then him going through my equipment pouches and took this book on medicine and tried to give it to Sasuke and Sakura while I was nearly out from chakra exhaustion, and then his refusal to even let his nindogs help me with my stealth as well as everything else he did, I figured he would just say something like looks like the villagers were right. And go back to reading his book. The third had a dark look on his face and said, I see. Yes, it is lucky for you they showed up then. I am sorry about Kakashi, Naruto. As for your request, take this note to the address and hand it to the man named Dustin and be honest with him about who you are because he was one of your dad's best friends and he knows you're not the Kyuubi. Naruto took the note and asked, what about the jutsu? The third looked up from his paperwork and said, when do you want to leave? Naruto said, the sooner the better. I would like to leave before my team makes it here because I don't want to put up with them. The third nods and said, I will have everything ready in 3 hours here. Go get what you need and before I forget, channel some chakra into this paper for me. As he reached into a drawer and pulled out a small piece of paper. Naruto grabbed it and it split down the middle and then both sides got wet, and where the split was it formed ice and the third was wide-eyed and he said, wind, water and ice. That is unique. Okay, go and get your stuff and I will get you some scrolls as well as a couple of books to help you and seal them up for you as well as give you a training schedule to help you. Naruto smiled and said, thanks. As he left and once the door was closed the third asked, what do you think, Jiraiya? A man walked in off the balcony and said, I think he's better than he lets on. He walked to the window when I dropped my pen. And that guy he killed was also an S rank nin, not a B rank. The third said, I know. I did not want to make him think he was stronger than he was by taking out an S rank nin. What about him having family? Jiraiya said, it's possible. Kushina did say she did not want to talk about her past. I think she just wanted to live a normal life instead of that of a princess. The third nods and said, I want you to let him sign your contract so we can keep in touch. If he can use Kyuubi chakra then he should have no problem. Jiraiya nods and said, alright, but he has to try and summon a frog before he leaves the village. Deal. The third said, deal. Jiraiya vanished in a swirl of leaves and appeared next to Naruto and said, the third thought of something and wanted me to get you real quick, and grabbed Naruto and left in a swirl of leaves. They both appeared on the edge of town and he dropped Naruto, causing all of Naruto's stuff to fall out of his pockets, and he saw a copy of his book and said, you read my work, pointing to the book. Naruto was about to say something when he heard Haku say, that's Jiraiya of the Sannin and Orthor of Ika Ika Paradise, and he said, yes, though I only just started and had to steal that copy from Kakashi. You're Jiraiya of the Sannin, right? Jiraiya nods and said, would you like the rest of the collection? And Naruto winced from the fangirl squeal, yes, from Haku in his head, and he shook his head yes, and Jiraiya handed him a scroll and said, all 16 editions are in there. Anyways, I was your dad's sensei, and since you need to keep in contact with the third, I decided to let you sign the Toad contract, and will also have some jutsu with the third for you when you get to the tower, though you have to summon a toad before I will let you continue. Understood. As he pulled the scroll of his back, Naruto nods, and after Jiraiya showed him what to do after doing his whole intro, he said, now put as much chakra as you can into it and see what you get. Naruto smirked and thought, hey uncle, let's floor this pervert. And he heard laughing inside his head as chakra flooded him, and he went through some hand seals and suddenly he was standing on top of a 100-foot tall toad. Jiraiya was wide-eyed and he heard, Jiraiya, why have you summoned me? Jiraiya said, I didn't, Minato-san did. He's the kid on you head. Gambunta looked at Naruto and said, why should I allow you to summon me and my kind? I respected your father, but you have not earned my respect. Naruto thought for a moment and smelled sake on Gambunta's breath and said, I will give Arozanin down there the money to buy you a whole barrel of sake, since I am not old enough to drink or buy it yet. I know you like the stuff because I can smell it on your breath. Gambunta said, I will agree, but only when you can summon me 2 times in one day, and every year you must buy me a drink, and when you get old enough we will drink together. Deal. Naruto said, deal. And Gambunta disappeared, and Jiraiya was flabbergasted and asked, how did you know about his alcoholism? Naruto said, I smelled the sake and took a gamble. Now time to finalize the deal. And he went through the hand seals Aegean and slammed his hands, and Gambunta appeared Aegean and was standing on Jiraiya, and he looked around and saw Naruto smiling while standing on his nose, and he narrowed his eyes and said, you are going to be a headache. I can already tell. Well, you are now my subordinate, so I give you the right to summon me and my kind, but if you call me for anything unimportant other than drinking sake, I will make your life hell. And left in a puff of smoke. Jiraiya, after picking himself up out of Gambunta's footprint, chuckled and grabbed Naruto, and they both disappeared in a swirl of leaves and reappeared in front of the wolf claw weapon shop, and Jiraiya said, see you later, and was gone. Aegean. Naruto blinked and said, that was cool, but ice is better. And he looked at the paper with the address and saw he was there and walked inside. Meanwhile, Jiraiya appeared at the Hokage's office and said, well, we have our communications worked out. He just summoned Gambunta 2 times in a row. With a serious voice, ignoring the look the third gave him as he dropped his pipe. Back with Naruto. Naruto had walked through the door and an overhead bell rang, and Naruto looked through the store and noticed a girl with brown hair up in 2 buns sitting behind a counter when he heard Haku scream in his head, that's change. Bring us out quick. Naruto was about to question why when he was suddenly flung against a wall when a man with brown and gray hair held a kunai at his neck and said, who are you and how did you come by that sword? Naruto acted scared for a moment and did one handseal ignoring the pissed look the man and girl were giving him, and suddenly two puffs of smoke appeared and the man who was holding Naruto felt a kunai at his neck and a voice said, "Please leave my future son-in-law alone, Dustin, and it's nice to see you still keep a kunai on your hip." Naruto soon felt himself being let go and he fell to the floor and looked at the two stunned people in Haku and Zabuza. He stood up and asked, "What the hell's going on, Zabuza?" Zabuza looked around and could see people walking outside the big window and said, "Can you close up shop for a little while, Dustin, so we can talk in private away from the view of the regular people?" The man who still had a kunai at his neck said, "Tenten, take them to the living room while I lock up," and the kunai was removed from his neck. The brown hair girl said, "Follow me, everyone." And she walked through a door and everyone followed, but Naruto was rubbing his neck until he felt Dustin put his hand on Naruto's shoulder and said, "Sorry about that," and helped push Naruto into the back room. A few moments later they were all sitting except Naruto, who had chose to stand after his warm welcome, and Dustin asked, "So what exactly going on here, Zabuza?" Zabuza sighed and said, "Well, we met the Gaki here and his team in Wave and Needles to say Kakashi killed Haku with something called a Chidori, and I died after my employer double-crossed me and kicked Haku's body, and the kid wanted to kill him but was almost out of chakra from fighting Haku because she had her mask on, but after he broke it he saw it was Haku who was his friend. We died, but the Gaki here is giving us another chance at life because of his bloodline, and so we are going to be getting new bodies when we get to Whirlpool to see his family," in a bored tone. Tenten and Dustin was stunned and both looked at Naruto, who said, "I was told to give this to you," and handed him a piece of paper the Hokage had gave him, and Dustin read it and his eyes got wide. Dustin said, "Take off your face masking." And Naruto reached up and pulled then down, and Dustin sighed and said, "You look just like your father. Forgive me for earlier and allow me to introduce my daughter and myself. My name is Dustin and this is my daughter Tenten. Tenten, allow me to introduce Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of the Yondaime Hokage." And Haku said, "And Prince of Whirlpool Country." Getting wide-eyed looks from Dustin, and Tenten had her mouth wide open and on the floor. After a moment Tenten said, "Wait a minute, your future son-in-law. How?" As she looked at Zabuza. Zabuza sighed and said, "Haku is going to marry the kid here and I am going to be his official bodyguard, and we are both teaching him our skills including Haku bloodline, which now he possesses as part of the deal we made." Dustin asked, "Is he ransoming you into this? While getting a kunai ready?" Zabuza chuckled and said, "No. I decided to treat Haku as my daughter and I want to see her happy, and that's why I am doing it." While Haku was getting some herbs to help me recover, she ran into him and they started falling for each other. Haku jumped up and ran over and grabbed a scroll off of Naruto's vest and said, "Open it." And Naruto sighed and bit his thumb and opened it, and Haku looked at the scroll numbering 1 on up and she channeled chakra into number 1 and out popped a copy of Ika Ika Paradise Volume 1, and she giggled and sat back down, ignoring the looks everyone was giving her. Tenten asked, "How did you get that, Haku?" Haku looked up and said, "My little kitsune here just signed the toad contract for Jiraiya-sama and summoned a huge-ass toad, and he gave Naruto the complete collection as a gift." Dustin looked at Naruto and said, "You summoned Gambunta?" Zabuza said, "Twice in 5 minutes." Getting a wide-eyed look from Tenten and Dustin. Naruto asked, "How do you all know each other?" Zabuza chuckled and said, "Well, I met Dustin about 6 years ago when he was making a tour to all the countries to get supplies for his business, and after I told him why I tried to kill the Mizukage, he agreed to meet me every year somewhere and allow me and Haku to resupply ourselves, and we became friends and write each other from time to time with pre-approved meeting spots." Haku and Tenten became pretty good friends. That mask Haku had on was made by Tenten. In fact, they practiced their first kiss with each other. Tenten and Haku both blushed while screaming, "Zabuza!" and looking down. Naruto smiled and Tenten asked, Why did you call him a kitsune? Naruto stiffened at this and Dustin said, we can't say. Naruto sighed and said, it's okay. I am immune to that law and am the only one who can let others know, so go ahead since I am here and tell it. Dustin nods and said, Naruto saved the village here the day he was born when his father sealed Kyuubi into him when it attacked the village. Naruto, Haku, and Zabuza all three shot glances at each other which did not go unnoticed by Tenten or Dustin, and Tenten asked, that's not the reason, is it? Naruto sighed and said, not entirely. I recently found out when I found out who my mother and father were while on the mission to wave who and what I am. Believe it or not, everything that happened at the beginning of the Kyuubi attack was not what most people think or for the reason he came here in the first place. As he leaned against the wall, Zabuza said, you want me to tell the rest? I know it's a little hard for you and I trust them so they will believe me. Naruto sighed and said, sure. As everyone looked at Zabuza. Zabuza said, Kyuubi real name is Uzumaki Sherlock, Naruto uncle, and he originally came to Konoha to bring his sister back to Whirlpool country because he did not believe the man she married was good enough for her. Some idiot thought if it's big it's an enemy, so they attacked him and Kyuubi defended himself and it snowballed after that. He could have came in his normal form but he wanted to get here quicker so he changed into his fox form. Now his only family is his grandparents who are the king and queen of Whirlpool who we are going to see, and his uncle who was just able to talk to Naruto on the wave mission when he used his chakra in a fight and he can't even touch him because he is inside a prison cage inside Naruto. To say the two were stunned would be like saying Gia and Lee liked spandex. It's an understatement. Dustin said, so Kushina was a kitsune. As he finally got over his thoughts. His answer was from Naruto who said, yes, like me. And he changed into his three-tailed form which was about 3.5 feet tall with blonde fur and red highlight and 3 tails behind him. Now there are some unspoken rules in the world. One is never turn into a cute cuddly animal with ears and a tail around woman. Result, Kawaii, from both Haku and Tenten. Haku was too stunned last time to do anything about it but now was different. Naruto soon found himself on the ground with Haku and Tenten playing with his tails, fur and ears while Zabuza and Dustin chuckled. After Naruto finally turned back and both girls got off of him, he looked at the clock and said, Zabuza and Haku, I know you both want to stay and visit cause I get the feeling you are all close like family, so I already gave you both enough chakra to last most of the night or until tomorrow depending on how much you use, but I have to be at the Hokage's office in an hour and a half and I still need to sell these extra weapons and get me some gear for the trip because I want to be gone before my team gets back. Dustin got up and said, let me see what you got, kid. Naruto pulled out 2 scrolls and rolled them both out on the floor and sent a mass amount of chakra into both and unsealed all the cloths and weapons in them. Dustin looked at them and said, I will give you a $200,000 for the whole lot. Naruto said, deal. I also got money to add to it. What I need is some storage scrolls, senbons, kunia, shurikens, weights, and some more cloth similar to what I have no, along with some ration bars and soldier pills. Anything either of you can think of to add to that. As he looked at both Haku and Zabuza. Zabuza said, no, that's all I can think of until we get there. What about you, Haku? Haku thought and said, a first aid kit. Naruto nods and Dustin said, Tenten, can you get all that real quick while I get something? As he got up and left the room and Tenten went toward the front of the store. A few minutes later Tenten came back with a single scroll and she said, I got you 200 of each weapon and enough rations to feed you for a month and 2 boxes of soldier pills and 2 first aid kits as well as a box of blank scrolls. That will be $60,000. Naruto reached into his pocket and pulled out $100,000 and said, can you make Haku another mask since I broke her last one? I don't mean she needs it, but it was special to her, so I think I should pay to replace it. Tenten nods and Haku blushes and they start talking about her mask and go into the back. Dustin passes them and walks toward Naruto and said, I don't doubt you, but I need to do one more test to make sure you are his son, so would you mind putting a little blood on this scroll for me? Holding up a scroll that had the kanji for yellow on it. Naruto nods and bites his thumb and then puts some blood on a seal and the seal breaks and Dustin smiles and said, this is your dad's scroll that contained the Hiraishin jutsu in it. All I know is that it involved these kuniyas, but I have no idea how they work, but they are yours. If you ever figure out how to use them, I have the master mold for them here, so I would be glad to make them for you. As he hands them to Naruto, and both Naruto and Zabuza are floored. Naruto looks at it and said, thank you. As he puts the scroll into the other scroll he had gotten from Tenten. Naruto sighed and said, I am sorry, but I have to go. Take as long as you and Haku need, Zabuza, and I will see you when you dispel. And walks to the front of the store and Dustin follows and locks the door after Naruto walks out. After that he walked back to the room where Zabuza was and said, okay, now that he's gone I want the whole story. Zabuza chuckled and Haku came back with Tenten and said, well, it all started when we were hired by a man named Gato. Naruto, after leaving the shop, went to his favorite ramen stand and saw Iruka there, and he took a seat next to him and said, how's it going, Iruka-sensei? Making Iruka look at him and notices it's Naruto after he pulls his mask down. Iruka said with a smile and said, I have been good, Naruto. When did you get back and how was your mission and what's up with the cloths? Naruto smiled and ordered 10 bowls of ramen and said, it was different. I met my family, learned who my parents were, had a bridge named after me, and a whole lot of other stuff. I am actually getting ready to leave the village for a couple of months to go meet my grandparents. Iruka was stunned and said, sounds like you had a great adventure. I am sorry to hear you're leaving so soon. If you don't mind me asking, who were your parents? I might have known them. Ayame said, yeah, Naruto-kun, I always wonder that as well. Naruto smiled and said, here's a clue as to who my father was, look at the mountain behind me and add whiskers to each of their faces, as he took a bite from his food. A moment later both Ayame and Iruka gasped and looked at Naruto and the Hokage mountain, and Iruka asked, are you serious? Naruto smiled and said, my real name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, nephew of Sherlock Uzumaki and grandson to the king and queen of Whirlpool Country. Take that, Konoha. With a smirk on his face, starting his fourth bowl. Iruka said, I guess that explains why then, huh? Naruto snorts and said, don't get me started on that. Anyways, I got to see the old man, and since I know your business is going to hurt while I am gone, Ayame and old man ramen, here's for mine and Iruka lunch, as well as a little payback for all the times you let me eat for free. As he lays $500,000 on the counter and gets up but stops and said, just make sure you got a warm bowl for me when one come back for the Chunin exams and we call it even. Deal. The chef smiled and said, deal, and it will be on the house. Naruto smiled and said, maybe I can bring my fiancé as well, but I got to go cause I want to be out of here when the rest of my team gets here. See you. And he got up and went toward the Hokage office. All of their mouths were hanging open and Iruka asked, did he say fiancé? And everyone nodded and looked at his retreating form. Iruka for the first time saw the sword and thought, something's wrong. Something happened on that mission if he wants to be gone when they get here, and what's he doing back first? A few minutes later Naruto walked into the Hokage's office and said, okay, old man. I got everything I need from the weapon shop, so can I go now? The third looked up from his paperwork and said, yes, Naruto. Here is the scroll I got for you, and there is a seal on it, so only you or me can get it. I used your chakra from your elemental test to make the seal on it, and it will only stay open for 5 minutes after you let go of it, since it only knows mine and your chakra, so no one else can get the jutsu in it. Naruto smiled and took the scroll and put it in a pocket and said, "Well, old man, see you later." And he left the office and headed toward the north gate. After he was gone, the third said, "Follow him, Jiraiya, and make sure he does not get into trouble with what you have learned. Don't let him know you're following him though." Jiraiya nods and jumps out the window and starts following Naruto from a distance. Naruto quickly made it out of the village and the guards never tried to stop him or ask for his papers, hoping he was running away to be a missing nin so he would be killed, and Jiraiya narrowed his eyes and shook his head and leapt over the wall and followed Naruto, who took to the trees and seemed to know exactly where to go. About an hour later, Team 7 made it to the gates and the guards looked at them and said, "How did you all leave the village Aegean without us knowing?" Kakashi looked at them and said, "We just got back. Whoever you let in was not us." And he took off toward the Hokage Tower with Sasuke and Sakura both ready to collapse behind him. They made it about a block when a mob formed in the road and someone shouts, "There he is. He, the guy who is sleeping with the last Uchiha. Let's get him." And charges at Kakashi, who was confused. A girl screamed, "I am coming for you, Sasuke-kun. I will show you what a woman can do for you and not this gay pervert," and tried to latch onto him. All three members of Team 7 were confused and they jumped up on the roof and tried to get away, but the roof was blocked as well. Kakashi sighed and used Shushin to make all three appear in the Hokage office. The third looked up from his paperwork and said, "Oh, Team 7. Good to see you, Aegean. So how was the mission and where's Naruto?" The third, acting all innocent. Kakashi started sweating bullets and said, "Well, the mission was a success, but there were a few problems, and as for where Naruto is, I don't know." The third narrowed his eyes and asked, "What do you mean you don't know? You're his sensei?" With a little anger in his voice while leaking a little killer intent. Kakashi sighed and wished he had his book, but since it disappeared he has not had a chance to get one, and said, "Well, he used a Kujbunshin to distract us on our way back from the mission because he said he needed to talk to you and came back early, but he said he was at the gates when the clone dispersed." The third asked, "So you're saying you could not tell that your student was a Kujbunshin, Kakashi? Do you have any idea what he wanted to talk to me about?" Sakura said, "The idiot said something about a first kill and some Iwa." Kakashi put his hand over her mouth to shut her up and the third blasted all three with ki enough to freeze them to the spot. After that he asked, "What is this about an Iwa nin, Kakashi, and what happened on this mission?" Kakashi groaned and asked, "Do you want me to let my team go before I tell you anything?" The third said, "No, I want them here for the whole thing since they may have seen something you haven't to help me learn where Naruto is." Kakashi began telling everything that happened on the mission, and by the end the third asked, "So Naruto just started going off on his own doing who knows what and you never bothered to check on him because you were spending all your time helping Sasuke with his Sharingan? Tell me, Kakashi, while you were doing this was Sasuke guarding the client any, or did you have just Naruto and Sakura switch back and forward?" Kakashi sighed and said, "Well, A knock on the door stopped him and Ibiki walked in and said, "Sorry for interrupting you, sir, but I confirmed the head of that nin you wanted me to check. It was Audley, White OC. He is a S-rank missing nin from Iowa. Wanted for murder of over 200 men and women." The third nods and said, "Thank you, Ibiki. I will have the money put in Naruto account when he returns in a few months." Ibiki nods and left and everyone was stunned, and the third looked at Team 7 and said, "Thank you for confirming the report I received from Naruto. Now tell me, Kakashi, where were you when Naruto faced that man he killed?" Kakashi was stunned and Sasuke asked, "How did that Dobi kill an S-rank missing nin?" The third said, "Shut the hell up, boy. You get out of line one more time and I will have you handcuffed to Tora for a month." Now Kakashi answer the question. Kakashi said, "I was with Sasuke." The third asked, "Sakura, besides tree climbing, has Kakashi taught you anything, and if so, what?" Sakura thought for a moment and said, teamwork. The third said, so he just lets you hit Naruto and fawns over Sasuke and teaches you and Naruto nothing. The third can see Kakashi starting to feel bad, but he's not done yet and asked, Sasuke, how much has Kakashi taught you so far and what jutsu? If I find you don't answer truthfully, I will ban anyone from teaching you anything else. Kakashi winced as Sasuke named off about 20 jutsu, and the third asked, Kakashi, when Naruto asked you for either scrolls, jutsu, help, or even help with your summons, what was your answer? Kakashi sighed and said, I told him I did not want to overpower the team. The third asked, and what was it you were doing with Sasuke, and don't tell me teaching him about his bloodline, because you could have done that with one jutsu. Also, why did Sasuke get out of helping guard the client while your other two students did the work? From what I heard, it was Naruto who did the distraction, came up with the plan and only included Sasuke in it because his aim was better to save your life, and then you totally ignore him. Answer me as to why you did that. Kakashi said, well, I did not want Naruto to brag about it because I was afraid it would go to his head. The third slammed his fist against the table and said, so then why did you not say thanks to the whole team instead of just Sasuke? Kakashi could not answer, and the third said, Kakashi, did you know Naruto taught himself waterwalking and has also gotten his chakra control down good enough on this mission to summon a boss summon 2 times? Kakashi was stunned and asked, what summon? The third smirked and said, Gambunta. Kakashi asked, so Jiraiya-sama has taken him? The third said, no. Naruto, when he returned with finding out who his family was and that he had family still alive, asked for a leave of absence. Jiraiya was here and he volunteered to let Naruto sign the Toad contract as only a messenger service so I can know where he is and get him if I need to. Other than that, I gave him 5 jutsu for each of his elemental affinities that were in the schedule for genin teams if they had those affinities that you should be teaching instead of what you are. He took the scrolls, resupplied his weapons and food, and left on his own to head to see his only family he has left. I just hope that he decided to return, because if they treat him halfway nice, he may not with the way this village and his team has treated him. Sasuke asked, why does that Dobi know how to summon? I am an Uchiha and should be the one who. The third blasted him with ki Aegean enough to freeze him and said, Kakashi, if this is how your student is acting with your training, I might have to send him back to the academy for being a fuck-up, because that attitude will not only get him killed but his team. As of right now, Kakashi, until Sakura is up to speed by my standards with Sasuke, and I mean teaching her everything you did with him as well as teamwork, and I mean actually teaching, and that includes the weight training as well, you are not allowed to teach Sasuke anything else. In fact, and faster than anyone could see, the third was gone from his chair and behind Sasuke and slammed both his hands on the side of Sasuke's head. Until that happens, I have sealed off his bloodline, so he has to learn not only respect for authority but also the proper way to train, and he can't go around the village just copying jutsu. And I am the only person in this village who can undo that jutsu I used on you, Uchiha, so you can't cheat, and your pay for this mission will also be dropped to AD rank pay for not only you but Kakashi for not doing your parts of the mission. Yes, you fought, but that is not what all of the mission is about. Your mission was a bodyguard job. Did you know that had Naruto not only done his job on the mission but also with his finding Gato hideout and killing this man, he not only saved the client's life but also his family and your female student's life? That Iwa Nin had came up with a plan to attack while Sakura was guarding Tazuna family with over 20 merc, and based on the plan and your own account of the mission, I can say it would have worked perfectly, and Sakura here would have suffered the same fate along with the client's family as over 200 men women this man has killed. Had it not been for a hunter team that showed up when they did, Naruto would have died, but Naruto did kill the Iwa Nin and they let him take the credit for it because they had the mercs, and one of the hunters turned out to be Naruto's uncle. Kakashi, your student should not have been in those dangers in the first place. You should have known better than to make a routine so blatant that your enemies can plan for. You should have been helping your students, especially with his first kill, which you were so far absorbed into training only one student you did not even realize. You should be thankful for Naruto, but you blatant disrespect is enough. I am tempted to have you locked in jail for the next 30 days. Kakashi with no porn. Kakashi was stunned and scared before Sakura asked, Hokage-sama. When Naruto clone left, he said he found out who his parents were. Who were they? The third said, well, it's a S-rank village secret, but since I know I can't keep it quite much longer, look at the picture behind you and add whiskers to the faces on the wall and you should be able to figure out his dad. All three turned, though Kakashi knew where to look, and after a growl and a gasp from his two students, Kakashi asked, where is Naruto? The third said, as of right now Naruto is not on your team any longer until the exams, and I may just include him on another team and ban your team from taking them if I do not feel they are ready. And Kakashi, I know about your private teaching to Sasuke after your team meetings as well, and I am ordering them to stop. If you are not teaching both members of your team evenly, then you are not to teach them. I am also banning you from reading your books the entire time Naruto is away, and should I find that you are reading them before he returns, then I will not only ban all stores in Konoha from selling them to you, I will have Kurenai burn your collection, and I will also have you locked in jail for 30 days. Do I make myself clear? Sasuke asked. Why is the Dobi getting special treatment? Is it because he's the Hokage's son? That earned him a slap, but from Sakura, who was wide-eyed and unable to believe she did that, much to the surprise of everyone. Sakura soon started to say she was sorry, but Sasuke started to do hand signs to attack her until Kakashi hit him, making him stop. The third looked at this and said, apparently Kakashi, your team is the worst of all the genin teams. I still can't believe you would do that to Naruto, not only after knowing he is your sensei's son but also saving your life as well as that of Sasuke from that masked hunter Nin. I am getting sickened by you the more I look at you, Kakashi. Until your team is up to speed, I am banning them from taking any missions, and I will be putting a third member on your team to not only get trained but also to report to me what you are teaching and not showing favoritism, since I am finding myself questioning your judgment. Now get out of my office. Team 7 quickly left and Sasuke tried to get his eyes to work but couldn't, and he said, Kakashi, I demand that you release my eyes. Kakashi sighed and said, I can't. I don't know what he did or how he did it. Meet at Team 7 training ground at 7 a.m. tomorrow. And left in a swirl of leaves. When he appeared in front of the memorial stone, his greeting was not what he expected, as he was slammed into a tree by Jiraiya. Jiraiya said, Kakashi, after what I saw from the Gaki and heard how you and his team treated you, I am tempted to kill you. That kid is on the breaking point thanks to you and your team's action. Both the third and I feel that had we not let him go with our guidelines, then he would be a missing nin now or gone on a killing spree, depending on if someone pushed him over the edge before he made it out of town. I am following him in secret, but I have to say one thing. The kid training himself has paid off for him, but if he would have had help he would not have made the same mistakes he is. You better pray nothing happens to him because of this, or you will be the first one I take out. And he melted into a pile of mud. Kakashi sighed and walked over to the memorial stone, and he thought, I am sorry, sensei. The third told his secretary to hold all meetings and decided to try Naruto idea out with the cage buns and found it worked great, finishing his paperwork in an hour. Kakashi, when he got home after leaving the memorial stone, he saw Iruka standing there with a pissed look on his face. An hour later, Kakashi would be admitted to the hospital for a broke nose. Naruto traveled for more than 6 hours at high speed through the trees and decided to stop for the night. He set up a few traps and slept in a tree. Tenten was laying on her bed and looked at her friend Haku, who was sitting in a chair, and said, so let me get this straight. You are marrying him, becoming a princess, and also getting a new body. Haku nods and said, yes. He's sweet. kind and caring and has been through hell in his life. Tenten sighed and said, I still can't believe the people of this village would do all the things you and Zabuza said, but with Dad saying he's seen some of it as well, it sickens me. Haku nods and said, that's why I feel so close to him. He's shown me love, even though we only know each other a little bit, but it has made my feelings for him grow. Tenten asked, so are you going to share him or are you keeping him all for yourself? Haku thought a moment and said, well, I was thinking about keeping him all for myself, but I might share him if I find someone who would treat him kind and believes the way I do about protecting their precious people, but I don't know anyone that would fill into that category besides you, but you're in love with that Neji kid. Tenten groaned and said, don't remind me. Yesterday after our team training I asked to talk to him privately, and when we got away from our teammate he told me to hurry it up because his fate would not allow him to be late to his training. What the hell kind of guy talks about training when a girl wants to confess her feelings for him? Haku giggled and said, almost as bad as that Hinata girl and her following devotion for Naruto-kun, though she can't and won't tell him. He may act like an idiot, but he knows how she feels for him, but he does not care for her the same way, so he acts like he does not even notice to keep from hurting her. Tenten was wide-eyed and said, he knows. He's that Naruto. Haku nods and Tenten starts laughing and said, I thought he was born in orange. I am sorry, I guess now that I know the truth, odds are that's all anyone would sell him. After a look from Haku she realized the truth. Haku said, that's why I said I would only let someone else marry him if they felt for him the same way I do and believe the same way. Tenten nods and said, if you take away everything he'd been through and the way he acts because of the village, he seems to be a great guy from what you said. Haku giggles and said, I think you like him. Tenten said, no, I mean, I don't know. I just met him, but from the way you describe him as he sounds perfect. As she lays back and looks at the ceiling. Haku blushed and said, yes he is, heart, body and mind. Tenten raises an eyebrow and asked, body. Haku leans over and whispers in Tenten's ear and Tenten flies back with a nosebleed. After getting cleaned up she asked, how the hell did you luck onto someone who looks like that, and how do you know what he looks like? Haku said, while inside him we can see what he sees and hear what he hears, and I looked when he was cleaning himself in the shower. With a beet red blush that matched Tenten. A knock on the door made both look away and Tenten said, enter. The door opened and Zabuza and Dustin walked in, and Dustin asked, so what have you both been talking about? Zabuza said, I bet it was Naruto with the blush you both got. While joking. Tenten said, you both were listening in, weren't you? Making both men wide-eyed. Zabuza said, I was joking, I did not think you actually were talking about him. Tenten looked away and Zabuza sighed and said, I just wanted to tell you before you went to bed that it was good to see you, Aegean. Tenten, in case we leave before you get up. Tenten nods and said, it was good seeing you, Aegean. Will I see you both, Aegean? Haku said, we will be coming back with Naruto-kun. His uncle has a plan, but he won't say yet what it is. Tenten sighs and said, so it will be when the exams come up, huh? Haku nods and said, yeah. It has been fun seeing you, Aegean. Change. Tenten said, I hope you all have a safe trip and return quickly. And grabbed Haku and hugged her, only for Haku to go up in smoke. Tenten sighed and asked, can you tell her I am sorry? Zabuza nods and said, don't forget you can't tell anyone about us or about his true heritage. The Hokage thinks that Kyuubi is evil and Naruto mother is just an ordinary princess. If people found out he was really a kitsune, all hell would break loose. Remember what I talked to you about, Dustin? I better go or Haku might jump him. And he waved bye before going up in smoke. Dustin smiles as he looked at his daughter and asked, so what's up with you, Haku and Naruto? Huh? Tenten blushed and reached under her pillow and pulled out some kunai and started throwing them at her dad, who was laughing as he ran out of the room. Naruto was asleep when Haku and Zabuza returned and they walked over to the cage and asked, "Why is he sleeping?" Kyuubi said, "I think everything is finally hitting him. He woke up here after falling asleep and then laid down and fell asleep in here. He made good travel so far, but I got bad news." Haku asked, "What's wrong?" Kyuubi said, "Naruto noticed he's being followed by that pervert. He made it look like a mistake and overshot a branch, but he actually put a cage bunched against a tree, and as he continued the clone saw the pervert following him and dispelled to tell him. That means until we either lose him or make it to the shore, neither of you can leave. The good news is at the rate the kid is going, he should be at the shore in a day or two at most, then it will take 4 days to get to the border of Whirlpool Country." Haku nods and walks over to Naruto and sits down beside him and picks his head up and sets it in her lap and starts stroking his hair. Zabuza smiled and Kyuubi asked, "So, did your friend agree?" Zabuza said, "Yeah, he agreed to it, but it will take time. You think the kid is going to like it?" Kyuubi smiled and said, "Yes. If Haku would have been in here when you mentioned that kiss, she would have had a field day with what went through his head." Zabuza asked, "When we get our real bodies, will we be able to talk like that still?" Kyuubi sighed and said, "Yes. You, me, the kid and Haku will all be able to talk to each other through our minds by thinking which one of us we want to talk to." Zabuza nods and said, "It comes in handy. I've been meaning to ask you. Since I am Naruto bodyguard, does Haku get one, or how does that affect her?" Kyuubi said, "When you get your new bodies I will explain it then, because if I try to now it would be confusing and I don't want to repeat myself." Zabuza sighed and said, "I understand."